The woman in my kitchen pointed a cast iron spatula at my chest and told me to get off her property. I was holding the deed to the cabin in one hand and the key I had used to unlock the front door in the other. Behind her, bacon crackled in my skillet, 2 kids ran up my stairs, and somebody had nailed a wooden sign over the fireplace that said Rourke Family Lodge. Established 1998. My name is Owen Mercer. I was 36, and until that morning I thought the worst thing that could happen to a man was losing his marriage, his house, and the dog he had raised from a puppy. Turns out life can always find a more creative way to humiliate you. 3 months earlier, I had bought that cabin outside Alder Ridge, New Mexico. After spending 4 years working commercial electrical jobs around Albuquerque and sleeping more nights in motels than I care to admit, the divorce left me with a pickup truck, a box of tools, and about $42,000. My ex-wife, Claire, was not cruel about it, which somehow made it worse. She looked at me across the lawyer's conference table and said, "Owen, you have been gone for years, even when you were sitting beside me." That sentence followed me like a ghost. So when I saw the listing for a neglected cedar A-frame on 3 wooded acres, I did not see rotten deck boards and a leaking roof. I saw quiet. The previous owner, Arthur Bell, had died without children, and the property was being sold through his estate. I paid for a title search, hired an inspector, signed every paper, and paid the first property tax installment early because I wanted one thing in my life to be clean, legal, and mine. Then I drove up the mountain with lumber, wiring, insulation, and enough optimism to embarrass myself. Instead of an empty cabin, I found a family eating breakfast. The woman with the spatula introduced herself as Lenora Rourke, though she said it like I should know the name. She was 50-something, wearing a red apron over a denim shirt, with silver blonde hair sprayed into a shape that looked resistant to weather and reason. Her husband, Wade, stood near the sink with a coffee mug and the expression of a man deciding whether violence would be worth the paperwork. Their son, Colton, maybe 18, leaned against my refrigerator and smiled like he had been waiting all morning for entertainment. Lenora tapped the spatula against the pan and said, "Arthur promised this place to my family years ago. You got sold a lie, sweetheart." I held up the deed. "No, I bought a house." She laughed softly. "City people always think paper means truth. I was born in Arizona and had lived in New Mexico for 14 years. But mountain people use the word city the way some folks used a slur." Wade stepped forward. "Look, maybe we can work something out. We put time into this place. You paid money, we put in sweat. That sounds like a partnership." I looked at the greasy stove, muddy boots on the couch, family photographs covering the walls, and herbs planted where my workbench was supposed to go. A partnership usually starts before one partner breaks into the other's house, I said. Colton laughed. Lenora did not. Her face went flat. "You need to leave before I call Sheriff Baines and tell him an unstable man forced his way into a home with children inside." That was when I understood they had prepared for me. I walked back to my truck because years around high voltage had taught me that anger makes people careless. From the driveway, I called the sheriff. Deputy Miles Ortega arrived 40 minutes later, looked at my deed, looked at Lenora's handwritten letter, then rubbed his jaw like both documents had ruined his morning. The letter was supposedly signed by Arthur Bell in 1998. Promising Lenora's family permanent use of the cabin. It was written on notebook paper, had no witness, no notary, and spelled Arthur's last name wrong. I thought that would end it. It did not. Ortega sighed. Property disputes get messy. They say they have been caring for the place. You say you bought it, until a judge sorts it out. This is probably civil. I stared at him. They are inside my house. He gave me the look public employees use when they want you to understand that your emergency is not on their schedule. Get a lawyer, Mr. Mercer. Do not confront them. By sunset, I was sitting in Rosie's cafe, drinking coffee that tasted like burnt pennies, while the owner studied me from behind the register. Finally, she walked over. "You are the developer trying to steal the Rourke cabin, right?" I almost laughed. "I'm an electrician." She crossed her arms. "Lenora says you forged the estate paper so you can build luxury rentals." That rumor had crossed town faster than my truck. Outside, I found TH thrashed into the passenger door and one tire cut through the sidewall. Across the street, Colton stood beside a dirt bike, watching me with that same lazy grin. He lifted 2 fingers in a little salute, then rode away. I wish I could tell you I felt brave. I did not. I felt stupid, outnumbered, and ashamed that after rebuilding my life dollar by dollar, I had bought a legal nightmare in a town where everyone believed I was a criminal. But beneath the fear, something colder settled in. Lenora had made one serious mistake. She thought a tired man was the same thing as a weak man, and she had no idea how patient an electrician can be when he is tracing a fault through a wall. The next morning, I called a property attorney named Evelyn Shaw, a woman whose voice sounded calm enough to lower blood pressure and sharp enough to cut glass. She listened without interrupting while I explained the deed, the fake family letter, the damaged truck, and the deputy who had labeled a home invasion a civil disagreement. When I finished, she said, "They are not acting like confused relatives, Owen. They are building a possession claim, and every day you wait gives them another photograph, another witness, another lie they can dress up as history." Her office was above a pharmacy in Santa Fe, all dark wood and old casebooks, and when she spread my documents across the table, she found the first crack in Lenora's story almost immediately. Arthur Bell had purchased the cabin in 2004, 6 years after the date on the Rourke's supposed promise letter. In other words, Arthur could not have promised them permanent use of a cabin he did not own yet. Evelyn leaned back and smiled in a way that made me understand why other lawyers disliked seeing her name on court papers. "Their evidence is not weak," she said. "It is impossible." That should have made me feel better. But legal truth moves at the speed of paperwork, while people with chainsaws can work much faster. 2 days later, I was served with a temporary protective order claiming I had threatened Lenora and frightened the children. Until the hearing, I was ordered to stay 500 feet away from the cabin. My cabin. I read those pages in the parking lot of a gas station while snow started tapping against the windshield. And for a minute, I felt that old divorce helplessness again. The sense that strangers in clean offices were dividing up my life while I stood outside waiting for permission to speak. Evelyn called before I could spiral too far. "Do not contact them," she said. "Do not answer their posts. Do not give them anger they can photograph. We win this with facts." So I started collecting facts. The protective order prohibited confrontation, not observation from public land, and the northern edge of my acreage bordered a Forest Service road. I parked a mile away, hiked through the pines before sunrise, and watched from a ridge with binoculars and a thermos of coffee. What I saw changed the entire case. The Rourkes were not living there overnight. Every morning around 8:15, Wade's faded green pickup climbed the road with Lenora, Colton, 2 younger cousins, grocery bags and laundry baskets. Every afternoon before dark, they packed everything back into the truck and drove to a rental duplex in Alder Ridge. They were commuting to my cabin like actors reporting to a movie set. They lit the chimney, hung clothes on the railing, put toys near the windows, and took photographs of themselves doing chores. Then they left. I followed them once from a safe distance and photographed the duplex address. Evelyn hired an investigator who confirmed they had signed a lease there 11 months earlier and were currently 4 months behind on rent. The cabin was not their home. It was their escape plan. Then Wade began making improvements. I use that word generously. He ripped out the original stone hearth, tore up half the pine flooring, and installed cheap laminate over moisture damage without fixing the leak beneath it. Every swing of his hammer echoed through the valley like he was striking bone. Lenora posted pictures online with captions about restoring our family legacy, and people praised her courage. She also put up signs saying work private land and began charging hunters $25 to park near the Eastern Trail. Evelyn told me not to interfere yet. "Screenshot everything," she said. "Let greed make them sloppy." Greed did not disappoint us. A hardware store owner named Martin Crow called me after Wade tried to open a contractor account using the cabin address and a utility bill with my name altered. Martin had believed Lenora's story at first, but forged documents made him nervous. Then Rosie from the cafe called, her voice quieter than before. The Rourkes had written 9 bad checks in 2 weeks, and Lenora had threatened to ruin the diner online when Rosie refused a temp. People were beginning to notice that the brave mountain family defending its heritage seemed to leave unpaid bills wherever it went. The real break came on a cold Saturday morning when I heard chainsaws from the Forest Service road. I reached the ridge and saw Wade and Colton cutting down the old ponderosa pines behind the cabin, the trees I had pictured shading a future deck. They had already dropped 7, and a trailer stacked with split wood sat beside the driveway. Colton filmed Wade for social media, while Wade announced that outsiders did not understand responsible land management. By responsible, he apparently meant selling someone else's trees for cash. I found Wade's advertisement that afternoon. Premium mountain pine, seasoned and hand-split, $180 a cord. He had photographed my woodpile, my driveway, and even my truck tracks. For the next week, I followed his deliveries from public roads, recorded license plates, and spoke with buyers after he left. Most were decent people who looked sick when I showed them my deed. One man gave me the handwritten receipt Wade had signed using the title property manager. Another had security camera footage of Wade bragging that the previous owner had left the place to Lenora, but some crooked estate attorney had stolen it. Each lie became another wire in the circuit I was building around them. Then they escalated. Someone smashed the remaining windows in my truck, spray-painted land teats, crossed the tailgate, and poured roofing nails across the road near where I parked. Lenora filed another report claiming I had followed her into a grocery store and whispered that accidents happen in the mountains. I had been working a hospital renovation in Albuquerque that entire day, with time cards, security footage, and 12 witnesses. Deputy Ortega looked embarrassed when Evelyn handed him the proof. False reporting is not a civil matter, she reminded him. That was the first time I saw the sheriff's department stop treating me like an inconvenience. But Lenora still had the town's attention. So she organized a Save Alder Ridge Heritage barbecue on my deck. She invited local families, a reporter from a small television station, and 2 county commissioners from the Ridge. I watched strangers drink beer beneath the roof I owned, while Lenora cried into a camera about corporate developers erasing rural history. Wade wore a veteran cap despite never having served, and Colton told the reporter that I had stalked his little cousins. I wanted to march down there and end the performance, but Evelyn's voice stayed in my head. Facts, not fury. Then I noticed Wade making deals near the tree line. Men handed him cash, and he pointed deeper into my acreage. The next day, tire tracks led to a fresh clearing where 14 more trees had been cut. Beside the stumps were leaking oil containers, broken batteries, and 3 vehicles waiting for repair. Wade had opened an unlicensed mechanic shop on my land. Antifreeze stained the grass blue-green. Motor oil soaked into the soil, and a dark ribbon of runoff curves toward a narrow creek that fed the reservoir below town. I stood there breathing cold air and petroleum fumes, and something in me changed. Up to that point, I had wanted my cabin back. Now I wanted these people stopped before they poisoned everything around it. I contacted a state environmental officer named Calvin Reed, a broad-shouldered man with 20 years of field experience and no patience for charming explanations. He collected soil and water samples while I photographed every container, drain path, and dead fish near the creek bank. The preliminary results showed petroleum contamination, elevated antifreeze compounds, and battery acid residue moving downhill. Calvin looked toward the cabin and said, "Whoever did this was not careless. The dumping points are spread out to maximize the affected area." That sin stayed with me. Later that evening, while reviewing footage from a trail camera Evelyn had legally placed near the public boundary, I saw Wade kneeling behind the shed with a notebook. He left it on the hood of his truck when Colton called him away. The camera zoom was not strong enough to read the pages. But 2 days later, a windstorm blew loose papers across the driveway and one landed beyond my boundary fence on Forest Service land. I picked it up with gloves. It contained estimates for cleanup costs, reduced property value, insurance payouts, and a note that read, "Owner will sell once liability exceeds equity." They were not merely occupying the cabin. They were deliberately damaging the land, so I would be forced to sell it cheaply, while they prepared claims for accidental contamination and storm loss. Evelyn read the page twice, then looked at me across her desk. "This is no longer a squatter dispute," she said. "This is fraud, extortion, environmental sabotage, and possibly an organized conspiracy." Before I could answer, our investigator walked in carrying a courthouse file and placed it on the table. Inside was a deed from 2004 with an attachment nobody had noticed during the first search. Arthur Bell had purchased the cabin from Wade's father, Vernon Rourke, and the sales agreement included a permanent waiver stating that no relative, here, oral promise, or future family claim would survive the transfer. Lenora's entire inheritance story had been destroyed by a document signed by her own father-in-law. Evelyn turned the page, and underneath it was something even worse for them, A copy of an insurance claim filed 6 weeks earlier using a forged lease and a fake signature from Arthur Bell, who had already been dead for more than a year. I looked at Evelyn, and for the first time since walking into that kitchen, I did not feel trapped. I felt the whole structure of their lie begin to hum under pressure, like overloaded wiring inside a wall, and I knew it was only a matter of time before something burned. The next 48 hours moved faster than the previous month. Evelyn sent copies of the forged lease, the insurance claim, the environmental reports, and the family wavered to the district attorney, the state fraud bureau, and a federal investigator named Marcus Hale, who had spent most of his career chasing insurance scams across rural counties. He studied the evidence in silence, then asked one question. "Do they know you found this?" "Not yet," I said. "Keep it that way. Desperate people run. The corner people get creative." He was right about that. Lenore launched another social media campaign the following morning, accusing me of poisoning the creep myself to frame her family. Wade planted a box of stolen tools in the bed of my truck and called the sheriff, apparently forgetting that the parking lot camera at my motel recorded him placing it there at 2:13 in the morning. Colton created fake accounts using my photograph and posted warnings that I was dangerous around children. The post spread for about 6 hours before Evelyn preserved the metadata and filed an emergency motion. Every lie they told now arrived with a timestamp, an account number, and a direct path back to their phones. Then a girl named Tessa Crow called me. She was Martin's 19-year-old niece and, as it turned out, Colton's girlfriend. Her voice shook so badly I had to ask her to repeat herself. "Mr. I, Pulte, Mercer, they're planning to burn the cabin." I sat down on the edge of the motel bed. "What did you say?" "Saturday night, after the family gathering. Colton said his dad bought gas cans and his mom already called the insurance company about faulty wiring. They're going to make it look electrical." For one strange second, I almost laughed. Of all the stories they could invent, they had chosen faulty wiring against an electrician. Tessa sent me screenshots of messages, photographs of red gas cans hidden behind the woodshed, and a video Colton had recorded while Wade explained where the fire should start so the chimney effect would pull flames through the roof. It was not careless talk, it was a plan. Marcus Hale watched the video twice, then looked at Evelyn and said, "We move Saturday." The operation came together quietly. State police handled the property crimes. Federal agents handled insurance fraud and mail fraud. Calvin Reed brought environmental enforcement officers, and the county fire marshal prepared an arson team. Deputy Ortega volunteered to assist, maybe out of guilt, maybe because he finally understood that calling something civil does not make it harmless. Saturday morning arrived clear and bitterly cold. Lenora had organized what she called the Rourke Heritage Reunion, and by noon nearly 50 people were spread across my property. There were campers in the meadow, dirt bikes near the creek, folding tables on the deck, and a banner stretched across the front of the cabin claiming the family had lived there since 1998. Wade was cutting another tree while Colton filmed him. Lenora stood near a local news van, wearing boots that looked brand new and telling a reporter that her family was defending sacred land from corporate theft. I arrived in a white work van with 6 people dressed like a renovation crew. 3 were federal agents. 2 were environmental specialists, and 1 was Fire Marshal Dana Price. When I stepped out, Lenora saw me and smiled for the cameras. "There he is," she announced. "The man trying to steal our home." I kept walking until I reached the edge of the driveway. No anger, no shouting. Just the deed in my hand and Evelyn beside me. Lenora pointed at Deputy Ortega. "Arrest him. He is violating the order." Ortega did not move toward me. Instead, he turned to her. "The protective order was dissolved this morning after the court reviewed evidence of false statements." Her smile flickered. Evelyn opened the courthouse file and addressed the reporter clearly enough for every microphone to catch it. "The Rourke family claim is based on a letter dated 6 years before Arthur Bell owned this cabin. The previous seller, Vernon Rourke, also signed a permanent waiver surrendering every future family claim when he sold the property." Lenora tried to interrupt, but Marcus Hale stepped forward and held up the forged lease. This document was used to obtain insurance benefits on property the Rourkes never owned. It contains the signature of a man who had been dead for more than a year. The crowd went quiet. Even the chainsaw stopped. Calvin Reed announced that the land was now an environmental crime scene because petroleum and battery acid had entered a creek connected to the public reservoir. He displayed photographs of dead fish, oil on the water, and Wade dumping fluids near the bank. The people who had signed Lenora's petition began backing away from her as if dishonesty might be contagious. Then Fire Marshal Price walked behind the shed and returned with the gas cans, each one having photographed in place, tested, and matched to a receipt found in Wade's truck. Tessa stepped out from behind Martin Crowe and handed her phone to an agent. Colton turned pale before anyone said his name. Wade looked at him, then at Lenora, and I watched their family loyalty collapse in real time. Lenora pointed at me and screamed that I had planted everything. That was when Marcus played the video of Wade, describing how to burn the cabin and blame the old wiring. Wade lunged toward Colton, shouting that the kid had ruined him, but two agents caught him before he made it 3 steps. The sound of handcuffs closing was softer than I expected. After everything, justice did not arrive like thunder. It clicked. Lenora kept performing until the transport doors shut behind her, yelling about government corruption and outsiders destroying mountain culture. Wade said nothing. Colton cried. The extended family members were questioned. Several were cited, and the children were taken somewhere safe while authorities sorted out who had actually participated. By sunset, the camp was empty. Trash bags rolled across the meadow in the wind, and the cabin stood there wounded but still standing. I walked inside alone. The laminate floor was ruined. The stone hearth was gone, and smoke from their cooking had stained the rafters. For a while, I just stood in the kitchen where Lenora had pointed that spatula at me. I expected victory to feel louder. Instead, I felt tired, grateful, and strangely sad. They had wanted what I owned. But underneath all their lies was a family so afraid of losing everything that they had convinced themselves theft was survival. Understanding that did not excuse them. It only reminded me how easily desperation can become cruelty when people stop seeing others as human. 6 months later, Lenora pleaded guilty to fraud, false reporting, and conspiracy charges. Wade accepted a 5-year sentence tied to the arson plan, environmental damage, and timber theft. Colton entered a supervised rehabilitation program and testified against his parents in exchange for reduced charges. The restitution order reached $130,000, though I knew I would probably never see all of it. Part of the recovered money funded creek restoration, and the town helped turn the Northern Trail into a public education route about watershed protection and property fraud. I rebuilt the cabin slowly. Martin donated lumber at cost. Rosie brought coffee and apologized for believing the first story she heard. Deputy Ortega helped install new boundary signs on his day off. Somewhere between rewiring the kitchen and rebuilding the deck, Alder Ridge stopped feeling like the town that had rejected me and started feeling like the first real home I'd chosen for myself. I still think about that first morning sometimes, about how close I came to screaming, swinging, or doing something that would have handed Lenora exactly the villain she needed. Maybe patience saved my property. Maybe documentation saved my freedom. But here is the question I still cannot answer. When a whole community supports a lie because the lie feels familiar, who carries more blame? The people who created it or the neighbors who never bothered to check? Tell me what you would have done, whether I waited too long, whether the town deserved forgiveness, and where you believe justice should draw the line. If this story made you angry, share it with someone who thinks property fraud only happens to careless people, and subscribe, because the next case proves that sometimes the person holding the official badge is the one helping steal the land.